understands, if President Trump is going to have any chance of being effective, he's got to be able to get things through the House. And I think what Karl Rove just said is essentially right. My guess is there will be 2 reconciliation bills. We did that when I was Speaker in 1997. So you can do 2. One will come very early and basically be the border and a few other things. The other will come, I hope, before the 4th of July. I recognize the challenges of writing a tax bill, but for the purpose of the 2026 election, the Republicans have a desperate need to get the economy growing fast enough that they'll be rewarded rather than punished in the off year. So there's a lot of things hanging in the balance. Every vote is going to be close. But remember, in the House, you can find a 1-vote majority. That's all you need. It's not like the Senate. There's no filibuster. 1 vote. And Nancy Pelosi showed with a 4-vote majority that she could ram through all sorts of stuff. Now, Republicans are harder to manage and harder to lead. They're much more independent than Democrats. And I have to say, I can't imagine doing Speaker Johnson's job. I was a reasonably effective speaker in a different time and with a different majority. What he does every day is like Job. I mean, he listens and he listens and he listens. And he's dealing with a group of contrarians who, if you said, I agree with you totally, they'd say, well, let me tell you this other thing I want. And I think you at some point have to draw a line and say, look, you're either with Donald Trump or you're not. You know, there's not a Massey majority. There's a Trump majority. The American people didn't endorse Massey. They endorsed Trump. And I think the conference has to understand that if they're going to be successful, they have to be a team. This is a team sport. And if you're not going to be a team, you're not going to succeed.
Mr. Speaker, it's Brett. I think you're selling yourself short on your speakership, but I will say that this team is not sticking together right now. Ralph Norman has voted for Jim Jordan. That's the number 2 on the screen there. So now you have Thomas Massey and Ralph Norman, and that would make, if they don't change those votes before the end of this vote, and the others, don't weigh in, it's still, you can't lose these 2, and it would mean for a second ballot here, which is maybe why you see Speaker Johnson looking a little nervous there, sitting next to Steve Scalise. What does that tell you, big picture here? You mentioned the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi, who we saw Hakeem Jeffries go across the aisle and hug when her name was listed. She managed to push a lot through with a 4-seat majority, but it is tougher to herd the cats with Republicans.
Yeah, well, what you're having, I used to joke that Teddy Kennedy would get awake in the morning and say the answer is more money. What's the question? You have a handful of Republicans who get awake every morning and say, I'm voting no.
The update is,
and they're contrarians.
So far, 2 Republicans have not voted for Mike Johnson.
With a very, very narrow margin. You were kind about my speakership, but I had a much bigger majority.
Or we won, I don't know.
We had a country which was decisive.
As it sits right now, it looks like it's going to be a tie.
Both Norman and Massey. So what's part 2?
But they still have another fucking 300 people, 200 people to talk to.
Accomplishing? Because I don't see what the second act is. And they might feel good and get some media, be able to raise some money, but they're doing it at the cost of the country. The country gave a mandate not to Massey. It didn't give a mandate to anybody else except Donald Trump. And I think for them to undermine this on the opening day is almost suicidally stupid. And I can't explain it except that over the years, and Carl watched all this and lived with it in the Bush White House, over the years there's been a group in the party who've grown more and more hostile, more and more self-righteous. Dave Winston just wrote a great piece today about the history. I lasted 4 years, and even though we balanced the budget, reformed welfare, cut taxes, by the end of it, there was a hardcore group of about 18 that were just tired. John Boehner won a huge majority, bigger than I did, and after a while they got tired. Paul Ryan got so disgusted he left. The guy who actually created the current majority, Kevin McCarthy, was in a constant running war with about 8 or 10 members. Then this small group is congealed into a very hostile, very destructive group. Fine, and if the opposition party, but astonishingly stupid if you're the governing party. And somehow Trump and others, J.D. Vance may have a big job cut out from here. They've got to sit these guys down and explain to them. And if that means that Trump goes and holds rallies in every one of their districts and mounts a tremendous effort to replace them, whatever it takes, you cannot have a hostile, contrarian, negative group if you're going to try to govern.
Yeah, primary them
Brett,
motherfuckers.
if we could bring our viewers through what is happening right now, as it has been looking more and more likely that it appears Mike Johnson would be falling short. Although we do caution, even if there are 2 votes against Johnson by name,
Now 3.
There's 3. Okay, that just came in. So we can't definitively say this is going to a second ballot yet. However, it's starting to look as if he is falling short, and they will go back to these members after this vote tally happens.
Yep.
Right, and it
So we're
doesn't
gonna
matter
spend
now.
all
If it
day-
holds in these 3, there's 1 vote for Jordan.
Actually,
1 vote for
I don't know.
Emmer,
Maybe it'll go tomorrow.
and
Who
1
knows?
vote for Donalds now against him.
I would much rather have Jim
She
Jordan
voted
or
for
Byron
Donalds,
Donalds, but I don't think either of them want the job.
Voted for Donalds for Speaker, but 3 against him by name.
Yeah.
This is going to a second ballot.
Yeah.
He will fall short, and we are getting to the end of the roll call here. So unless they switch their votes, we are going to see a second ballot, which, if we remember back to 2023, how painful
Wasn't there like
this
8 of them?
process was for Republicans to go through, Mr. Speaker. I mean, there were 4 days for these votes.
Look, I use this language very deliberately. These people are insanely destructive. What is round 2 going to be? You have one guy gets 186 votes right now. Another guy gets 3. Actually, 3 people get 1 each. So what's round 2 going to be like? The same 3 guys are going to hold out, and they're going to hold out forever? I mean, it's certainly their constitutional right. They're independently elected. But let's be clear. This is a stunningly stupid, suicidal strategy, which only weakens the Republican Party, weakens President Trump, makes it harder to fix America. And I don't know what it is. These guys need psychologists. I mean, I don't know
Newt,
what
you are right.
they're accomplishing in the real world, except to make a spectacle out of this thing. Now, I hope that at least 2 of them will switch. I think Massey's probably utterly, totally hopeless. He's sufficiently certain of his moral rights and his brilliant insights that I don't think he'll move under any circumstance. But I would hope the other 2 would realize that they're going to look like idiots. That it's not going to change. I mean, the party's not going to go, oh, gee, 214 of us were right, or 215 of us were right, but you 3, you've convinced us on the second ballot. Let's do something else. I've been in this business, as you know, a long time. This is really literally as self-destructive as I've ever seen a political party be, and it's down to a handful of people. Everyone else is trying to get it to work. Everyone, moderate, conservative, Freedom Caucus, you name it. They're all trying to get it to work, except for a very tiny handful.
All right, so Mr. Speaker, considering the way this is going right now, with the last that we heard from Keith Self voting for Byron Donalds for Speaker, making him the 3rd Republican to vote for someone other than Mike Johnson, if it just doesn't go the way for Mike Johnson, what is this forecasting about the next couple of years?
Well, look, it's going to be tough. I mean, it's always going to be tough because the margin's too narrow in the House, and it's always going to take. The only way President Trump can govern successfully at home is to arouse the American people the way Reagan did, and frankly, the way we did with the contract with America. I mean, when we passed welfare reform, we got half the Democrats to vote with us because it was so popular.
Now, I'm still
When we passed 4
kind of trying to
consecutive
understand
budgets,
this a little bit.
we got Democratic votes because it was so popular.
If
When
3
Reagan passed his
Republicans
big tax
didn't
cut,
vote for
he
him,
got 47 Democratic
and all
votes
the Democrats
because it was
vote
so
for Hakeem
popular.
Jeffries,
So Trump will have to go to the country.
doesn't that make
and
Hakeem
find a
Jeffries
way
the Speaker of the
to
House?
so
Or
arouse citizens. The
like,
citizens put so much pressure
I don't
on moderate Democrats to
understand.
vote for election next year that he can build a bipartisan coalition.
I really don't know
on
what's
his
going on.
terms for
Most
his
of the
issues.
time, I know what's
That's
going
the
on,
only
but you know
possible
what?
way to manage a
I got
house
another phone.
this
I
narrowly
can look this
divided,
up.
particularly when you have a handful of people who would rather help the Democrats than help the Republicans.
How does the Speaker of the House vote
again
work?
about these numbers. As you see, it's 206
According to Gov.
Shut up.
now. 3 have voted by name for another option,
What
3
the
Republicans.
fuck is this?
And
Where's
there
this
are
come
others who
from?
have not voted either way. You have a situation
What
where if every
document is
Democrat
this?
shows up, which would be 215,
Okay.
the magic number could be 215.
House practice,
depending on what the
a guide to the
total
rules,
number
precedent, and
is
procedures of
voted.
the House.
So
This
you have
is
the
nomination
final
and vote.
Go back around to the people who didn't vote, and this is going to come down to the wire. Let's
Under the
listen
modern
and see how
practice,
this
the
starts to
Speaker is
wrap up
elected
here.
by a majority of the members elect housing voting by surname.
Johnson.
A quorum being present,
Webster of Florida.
clerk appoints tellers in this
Johnson.
election. However, the House and not the clerk decide what
Westerman.
method shall elect it. Okay.
Johnson.
So wouldn't that mean
West
Hakeem
side.
Jeffries is going to win then?
Jeffries. Weed. Johnson. Williams of Georgia. Jeffries. Williams of Texas. Johnson.
Okay, and here it says
Wilson of Florida.
from the Constitution that they don't even have to elect.
Wilson
They don't
of
have
South
to elect a
Carolina.
sitting member of Congress to be Speaker of the
Johnson.
House. They
Whitman.
technically could elect anybody that they want to.
Johnson. Womack. Johnson. Yakov.
So why don't they find
Johnson.
a fucking libertarian that is
Zinke.
right in the middle and let him do it?
Johnson.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a parliamentary inquiry. I note that the names of the representatives from the Americas, Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia were not called, representing collectively 4 million Americans. Mr. Speaker, collectively, the largest per capita of veterans in this country.
Does the gentlelady have a
I
parliamentary
asked
inquiry?
why they were not called.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I asked why they were not called from the parliamentarian, please.
Delegates-elect and the
Who's
resident
that?
commissioner-elect are not qualified to vote. Representatives-elect are the only individuals qualified to vote in the election of a speaker. As provided in Section 36 of the House Rules and Manual, the speaker is elected by a majority of the members-elect voting by surname.
Mr. Speaker, this body and this nation has a territories and a colonies problem. What
This will
was
be in order.
supposed to be temporary has
Gentlemen,
now
this is
effectively become permanent. We must do something about this
The
problem.
gentlelady is no longer
so that these-
recognized. House will be in order. The reading clerk will now call the names of the representatives-elect who did not answer the first call of the roll.
First one I had, Arizona.
Biggs of Arizona. Johnson.
Carson.
Carson. Jeffries. Cloud. Johnson. Clyde. Clyde.
I guess Clyde didn't feel like going to work today.
Gosar. Gosar. Harris of Maryland. Johnson. Roy. Johnson. Waltz. Johnson.
If there are any representatives-elect who did not answer the call of the roll, they may come to the well and vote at this time.
Just stand right there.
Just say Clyde.
Just say Clyde.
Clyde. Clyde.
What the fuck just happened?
Should I say? Gosar. Johnson.
So he wins, right? That's not 535. There's still 4 votes missing.
Clyde. Johnson.
216.
Hello? No, I'm calling around to find out where she has to be with my mom, I guess. All right, sorry. Now, who are these fuckers?
We don't know what the number is, the magic number. There were a number of names read. A couple of people said Johnson. We think we're accurate at 217, but until we hear from the clerk exactly what the total number of members is, we can't tell you what the magic number is, whether it's 217 or 218. If 3 others or 3 representatives voted for other names by name, we think that means it has to go to a second ballot, but we can't tell you that until we know the total number. And with that flurry at the end, with all the names, Speaker Gingrich's still with us. This is the process of the chamber as you look live at Steve Scalise and Mike Johnson talking with each other. Thoughts here?
I think Carl Rove's with us. We knew had to step away, but Carl, I mean, we were keeping track. Biggs, they went back to Biggs, Johnson, voted for Johnson. Cloud went Johnson, Clyde, Johnson, Gosar, Johnson. But we've got the three who voted for others, including Norman for Jordan, Self for Donalds, Massey for Emmer. Your thoughts as we're trying to do the math here and see where this ends up, Carl?
Well, it is confusing, but it's clear that if two of the three votes for Johnson, he's in. It may be that if one of them does, he's in at 218. But Brett is right. Until the clerk declares, and the clerk is being advised by four individuals, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats who are designated by their respective party leaderships.
It's 217 to 213.
Until we hear from them.
3 others. That 217 is better than 216. I don't get it.
Program with us?
How is that not a majority? Like,
Brett, I'm here.
I don't understand.
Chad, this is something.
Not like I want the guy to win, but I just don't understand how 217 to 216 is not a majority.
Move one of the 3 others, but what they have to give up to do that, to stay on a first ballot, as it stands right now, he is shy of 218, and it would have to go to a second ballot. Is that fair?
Oh, I get it. Okay, I get it. He has to get
right on the edge. Again, this is kind of
he has to get 218.
They do in real time.
All right.
The reason we don't know the actual
majority
number
of
is
the
because
overall
they're
voting
tallying right
members.
now and
But I
checking with the tally clerks on the dais there in the front of the
They
House
didn't all
chamber
vote.
to determine how many people cast votes by name. That's going to be very important because you had 3 members who voted for someone by name who is not Mike Johnson or Hakeem Jeffries. When you look at the list here, you had a vote for Tom Emmer. You get from Thomas Massey. You get the idea here, and that's the problem. So can they go back and switch those votes, or do they have to go to a second ballot? Just before the roll call vote started, Brett, you had Tim Burchett, the Republican congressman from Tennessee, who certainly had some disagreements with Mike Johnson, and was somebody who was a big question mark, indicate that he thought that this would go to a second ballot no matter what, and then he voted for Mike Johnson. He was somebody who was unclear about where he was going to vote. You had Ralph Norman, the Republican from South Carolina, who did not vote for Mike Johnson. So you see how this is a problem there when, he could only lose 1 vote, that this would immediately kick it to a second ballot. Now, if this does go to a second ballot, and keep in mind right now that the House is not constituted, they can't swear in the members. There's no speaker until they close this vote. And at that point, then, if they do determine that they have somebody who's gotten the majority of those casting ballots,
But this is another one.
By name,
The people who aren't sworn in are already voting for the Speaker of the House. So how can they vote for the Speaker of the House if they're not sworn in?
Circumstances with 434 members,
This shit boggles my fucking
came in
mind.
At 219, he could go to 218. If that turns out to be, in fact, the magic number, he's probably short.
Chad, can you explain what might be happening right now?
Yeah, well, right now what they're doing is the tally clerks, you have Brian Stile, the Republican from Wisconsin, who is the chair of the House Administration Committee. He is alongside Virginia Fox, a Republican from Virginia. You have Joe Morelli, a Democrat from New York. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Administration Committee. They're kind of checking the cross tabs here and making sure that everybody has recorded their vote and that everybody is on the same page. In other words, there's no room for error. And then they will come back and they will announce whether or not we have a speaker or not. Now, there are 2
let me interrupt
philosophies
you, Chad.
here. Yeah, go ahead.
We're getting word that all of the holdouts casted votes by name, meaning that it would be 218 as the magic number. Obviously, you don't hear it until the clerk says it, but just doing our own math, our tally on air is where things stand, and that means it's short of the 218 needed, which is perhaps why there are all these conversations going on here. And the vote is open. It's not a closed vote as of yet, and one of these 3 could change their mind, I suppose.
Conceivably, yes. It's not closed until they close it. There's no time on this. And what you have to look for, if they do in fact determine that they have not gotten a speaker on this vote, the 2 philosophies that I've been told here, and this comes from a couple of senior Republican sources, is one thought, yeah, people have made their protest and they'll go to a second vote later tonight or later this afternoon, and then we will have a speaker. Or if these people are dug in so deeply, this is going to be a Saturday or Sunday project. And if this does go to a second ballot, I want to remind everybody how rare this is. Obviously, we had the 15 rounds over 5 days 2 years ago before they elected Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House. Brett, it was 100 years, 1923, with the re-election of Speaker Frederick Gillette from Massachusetts, a Republican. That was the last vote until 2 years ago that went to even a second ballot. It took four ballots with Frederick Gillette in 1923. So if this goes to a second ballot, we're starting to establish new precedents in the way that they elect a Speaker of the House.
And just to be clear, Chad, we went to 216. That's the official vote. He got 216, which would be too shy of the 218 majority. Clyde was counted twice in our tally. 216 is the official tally now. And we're going to come to the end here, and it's going to say, basically, there is not a Speaker of the House currently in the United States.
That's right.
House of Representatives, and this will go to a second ballot. So here begins this process.
And Brett and Martha, the other thing to note about all this is kind of what Republicans feared. They went through that 5-day nightmare 2 years ago. They didn't have